It means the ministry's interfering at Hogwarts.
You're not going mad. You're just as sane as I am.
I must not tell lies.
You seem to be laboring under the delusion that I'm going to, what was the phrase? Come quietly.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are talking about Chapter 13, Detention with Dolores.
I love the alliteration.
I bet you would. As you can tell by that laugh, Elizabeth is with us.
Hi, guys.
Before we get into the episode, I wanted to shout out Emma's profile, who left a comment on Spotify on our Book 1, Chapter 1 episode, where she said, quote, "The episode is super good. You are so funny and explain stuff I didn't catch when I read the series."
Aww.
End quote. That's really cool because that's something that we try to do here is dig a little deeper.
Yeah, I feel like you catch something new every time you reread it.
It's one of the cooler things that I've experienced doing this podcast. So I hope that comes across. And thank you, Emma's profile, for your comment.
Yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying it.
So Elizabeth has a lot to say on some of the classes that we experienced last chapter.
Okay, to be fair, you're like, we need the teacher perspective, and I'm the podcast teacher that we have available. So.
Her profession is literally teacher in a school. So
Yep.
It's fun to get her perspective on a lot of that. So we'll get to that in a second. But let me run down what actually happens in this chapter before we get to the last chapter. That makes sense. We get more fallout from the Harry versus Umbridge of it all in yesterday's class.
Mm-hmm.
And we also get some looks at charms, transfiguration, care of magical creatures, and herbology in this chapter. We also get some interactions between Harry, Ron, and Hermione that I feel are very interesting. And we obviously get a round of detentions with Dolores. So we also get some Quidditch. News.
Yeah, a little bit of Quidditch.
So
I always love that.
before we get to the classes mentioned in this chapter, what were some of your thoughts on last chapter's classes?
All right. Well, I personally love it whenever we have a deeper dive into the actual classrooms. I know everyone is always like, "Oh, it's so boring. They're in school and I'm reading about Harry just sitting in a classroom." I love it, but I have a bias. It started with the history of magic, and I 100% agree with you and Molly's take and Harry's take on Professor Binns. I think that if history of magic were done by somebody else, it could be a super, super fun class.
Anybody else or just a living person?
See, I was thinking about Binns as a living person. I feel like he was probably this brilliant professor, but the problem is sometimes you have people who are so smart in their subjects that kind of makes it harder for them to be a good teacher. And the aspect that they kind of struggle with is just connecting with the kids and making it interesting to kids, because not every kid is interested in the thing that you're passionate about. Like, I mean, I could talk about Shakespeare for forever, but not every kid is going to love that. So you have to make it interesting for them. And I feel like Binns just doesn't know how to do that. But if somebody else tackled the subject, I feel like they really could, because the history of magic, I mean, it sounds fascinating to me.
I think it could be one of those subjects that's actually the highlight of your schedule, especially for like Muggle boards.
Oh, yeah. It'd be interesting to hear how, like, the same way how technology has advanced, like, how has magic advanced over the years?
Yeah, I mean, giant wars sound really cool. Like, I would want to learn about that.
I would also want to know, like, how much they go into the methods for hiding those types of things from the Muggles, because I think that would be really interesting. Especially in the ages where there was, witch trials and whatnot of.
That's true, but here's my question for you. You're Professor Binns. Whether you're a ghost or not, you're teaching in the magical world.
Yeah.
And while you have magic, you don't necessarily have technological advances at your disposal. You can't show them a movie of the giant wars. Like, we could show movies of like Saving Private Ryan, here's this D-Day.
Well, I don't know.
Pearl Harbor.
I personally had an amazing history teacher. Shout out to Mr. Fay. But he didn't really show movies all that much, but he would do so many activities that would try to put you straight into the time period and connect for us, like put ourselves into the shoes of the people who were living during that time. And we looked at so many like songs and comics and everything about the culture. So it wasn't just like, here's the year that this thing happened. Like we experienced it. And I feel like if Professor Binns did that, it could be super fun to learn about giant wars and goblin revolutions and even the crazy wizards who just exploded themselves or whatever the case may be.
So here's my very quick story, because we do have other classes to talk about, but here's my very quick story about...
No one has ever talked about Professor Binns this long.
One of my professors did have a style of teaching that was like literally one of those old projectors, and he would just move the papers over the projector, and you just literally take notes the entire class. But, which is very similar to Binns' style of teaching. However, he would mix in some liveliness to it.
Yeah.
If it was an exam day, he would blast Sandstorm. Like, he would make the floors shake. You always knew he was giving out exams when you heard that blast. Second way is he'd have us do maps. And he would actually have us color in what the world looked like in Roman times, or what the world looked like during World War I, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the third way is he would spice up his notes just a little bit to keep you, like, in. So we'd come back from winter break, and he would start off the notes with, a long time ago in a civilization far, far away.
Nice.
Like, and he'd have the scroll because that's what he was doing on the projector. So he would scroll down as like, the Roman civilization has fallen into disorder as the as the emperor has fallen. You know?
I really feel like there are those teachers who are fantastic at lecturing. I think Binns is just not one of those.
Yeah.
So moving into potion, since that was the next class that he had, one, I have to give Snape credit. The fact that he is able to walk into the room and the class falls silent, I know in part it's because they're slightly terrified of him, but these are 15-year-olds. Such immaturity. So the fact that they can just fall silent like that, like, I have to give him respect for that. But I don't give him respect with what he's doing during these actual lessons. Like, I don't know if this draught of peace was supposed to be a practice test kind of thing, or just an actual, here's the lesson that we're doing today. But, like, I would assume that as you're having, if it's not a test, my assumption would be that you are walking around the classroom and you are trying to correct the kids before they're making stupid mistakes. And he doesn't seem to be doing that, because both the Gryffindors and the Slytherins alike are coming up with these potions that are the completely wrong color and consistency, and just, they're obviously not the draught of peace. And I mean, Harry said he couldn't see the instructions on the board because there were so many colored fumes that are just taking up all of the airspace in the dungeons, which also makes me wonder why there isn't some type of ventilation system, because I feel like all of that vapor is not great if it's magical vapor.
Clearly they took them out after the Chamber of Secrets because pipes were a problem.
I don't know, but I feel like Snape should be going around, instead of letting, like, yes, there is validity in letting kids learn from their mistakes, but I feel like if you're going to be grading them on the quality of the potion that they're making, and this isn't a test, then you should be trying to correct them as they go.
I agree with you overall. I think it might be, well, okay. I agree with you in most circumstances, and that a teacher walking around helping or adding like some comments might help generally. Like in our chapter 13 that we're doing today, I think Flitwick would be really good at that.
Yeah, Flitwick does seem to make the rounds of the classroom.
Snape, however, already inspires the fear in the kids enough to the point where they're quiet upon entering the classroom. He might make them worse than better.
True. Then I think what he should have done is, instead of just having the instructions on the one board that you could no longer see, they should be having like worksheets with the instructions to follow that they can pull up to their faces and then like follow along with it. Actually see the instructions.
I do have some spoiler thoughts on this, but I'll save those for the spoiler section. Still non-spoiler though. The thing about potions is, and maybe the reason why he doesn't get up and walk around, is it's so regimented in the directions.
Oh yeah, I mean, some of it's like if you like
stir
breathe
clockwise 3 instead of 4 times, and it throws the whole thing.
Yeah, like my goodness, imagine having to use the bathroom while you're brewing this thing.
So I'm thinking like part of his teaching style is also in the format of he doesn't believe he has to because it's right there anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it's not my fault you can't follow an instruction.
Which for me, like, I get, but, and maybe as 5th years, then yeah, this should be a thing. But for me, it just seems like there should be there should be a purpose for the teacher being there and not just babysitting. Like, interact with the kids. That's the whole point. They're learning still. So talk to them and correct them and ask them, wait, well, if you don't want to correct them, then be like, okay, why are you about to add this? Want to take a look at the board again? Yeah, okay. You're on that stuff. You sure that's what you want to do? All right.
You're saying Snape should talk to the children. You know full well he has no desire at all.
He'll talk to the Slytherins, but even they were struggling.
I don't think he even wants to talk to the Slytherins, to be really honest.
To be fair, I probably wouldn't want to talk to Malfoy because Malfoy's going to start sucking up to me and be like, okay, child. But
anyway,
I don't know.
Next class.
Divination, one of your favorites.
Let's not go too far.
I enjoyed her lesson plan, actually. So,
ooh, you agree with me. It was a good lesson.
I thought so. I mean, she said, read the section that was in the book about like dream interpretation, and then get with a partner, interpret each other's dreams. And I think that is a good activity. I mean, it's good within a lesson period to have multiple activities because your brain will lose focus after 15-20 minutes. So it's always a really good idea to switch it up. The only thing I would probably have changed, I feel like all these Hogwarts professors are just assuming that the kids, when you tell them to read something, they're actually going to read it. I know from firsthand experience that when you tell a kid to read things, some of them will read it, some of them will pretend like they're reading it, some of them will just stare out the window and like, or the ones that do read it are so confused or like, I don't know what I just read, especially if it's super boring. So I would probably read it with them and discuss it as we went and then tell each other to, interpret each other's dreams, which is a personal topic. It kind of reminds me a little bit, maybe not as extreme, but a little bit with Lupin's Bogart lesson, because you're facing your greatest fear. Do you really want people to know that? And do you really want them to know your, deepest, darkest nighttime dreams? But at the same time, I do think it's a really good lesson, and I think the homework is interesting and easy enough to do. I mean, they're complaining about their homework all the time. It's literally just write down your dream. Not that hard.
So, Harry specifically says he doesn't want to tell anybody about his dreams.
Yeah, he doesn't want to share it, which I completely understand.
Which I find hilarious, though, because he's blamed in the past Trelawney for, like, making up stuff or whatever, and it's fine. But he has things that actually could benefit from
dream
some
interpretation.
Kinda, yeah.
I wonder if that Dream Oracle book would interpret Harry's dreams correctly or not.
Fair enough.
I do enjoy Ron, like, bringing up the dream about him playing Quidditch, which is, of course, we'll get to more into later with Ron and Quidditch, but she's really dropping the little hints of what's to come early in the chapter, which I think is cool. Then we moved into Defense Against the Dark Arts, our first time with Umbridge. Everyone's favorite. To be fair to Umbridge, I don't think she's wrong with what she initially says. She tells them how their learning has been fragmented, which is a big problem. I feel like with a lot of the classes that they take, especially like potions and transfiguration and charms, it reminds me of like math class or in English, your writing, your grammar, it all builds upon itself and you have to master the basics foundation before you can get to the higher stuff. I feel like Defense Against the Dark Arts hasn't been able to establish any type of scaffolding from year to year to year because every professor has done something completely different. I mean, like Lupin's, yes, he was a great professor, but he's covering dark creatures because that's his wheelhouse. And Barty Crouch Jr., in the form of Moody, of course, is doing the dark curses, which he also has a lot of experience with. Coral, I'm sure, actually did legitimate stuff, but it was probably basic because
We also didn't get very much of him in the
we didn't really
classroom.
see much of it. It was his first year, and he, to be fair, was a little preoccupied at the time.
He had some stuff going on.
Lockhart also had a lot on his mind, and it was Lockhart. Lockhart was on Lockhart's mind. So I feel like we really haven't had a chance to build up a basic curriculum for them. So I do think she has a valid point of we should understand the principles of what is Defense Against the Dark Arts. And I do think the second point she had about learning when you should use it is also really good. And putting it into context as to like, you know, here's how you recognize the situation. Here's a particular spell you could use. This is the legality behind it, like that kind of stuff. But to be perfectly fair, Hermione and every other child in that room is correct. They have to practice it. I know you and Molly were talking about practicing in order to like get better at it. And that's so true of so many things. And if you're going to become a great author, like you have to practice writing, and no one is good from the start. And Umbridge's ridiculous belief that, yeah, on the owls, if you study the theory well enough and you've read it well enough, then sure, you can pass. Like, no, woman, that's not how education works. You have to actually do the stuff. That part just makes me mad. That's just 100% her being, you know, government dictated education. I also did not love the fact that she referenced the dangerous half-breeds of Lupin. I feel like she went way too far with that. I mean, that's showing in her prejudice. And she did mention too how Moody, Barty Crouch Jr., had showed them spells that were far too complex for their age. I found that a little insulting. They were 14, 15-ish year olds at the time. I think that a lot of people underestimate what students are capable of, what teenagers specifically are capable of. Yes, they're still immature, but they show maturity in other ways that just sometimes astounds you. And I think since Moody Crouch, like, he showed them the spells in a way that was like a safe environment, and the spell that he practiced with them, I mean, he wasn't having them like go out and hurt each other. It was perform gymnastics, sing a song, like, you know.
He only took away their free will.
Yes, but it was in a school safe environment.
For 4th years.
Yeah, but would you rather have them learned it in like out in the field?
Here's where I disagree with you. I think she's right. I think because their education has been so fragmented, they have learned some stuff that I don't think they have any business actually learning at that age that they are at.
Okay, I'll give you this. He probably should have sent home permission slips being like, Can
I take away your kid's free will?
Can I perform this curse on your child? Yes or no? He'd probably get a lot of no responses.
He'd probably get arrested. That's illegal.
In an educational purpose, though. I don't know.
Let's be at least somewhat more conservative and be like, that's a Newt level thing.
Okay, I could give
That's
you
a
that.
graduate level thing.
I think at least like telling them about it, showing it to them, that was good. Maybe learn what they are in your 4th year and then Newt level practice it.
So, being real for a second, that what she says there about learning magic too advanced for your learning level strictly comes from the trial and her hearing, I'm sorry, you learned a Patronus charm in your 3rd year?
Yeah, 100%.
That's where that comes from.
100%, yeah.
So, I mean, literally, that's a 1-to-1. So that's where that comment comes from. But
and there's the fear that, Dumbledore is training up these children to, like,
fight a war
and overturn fudge and all that. So let's try to make sure they do as little magic as possible. I love Parvati talking about, like, how the practical part of the owl, it's so important. And to me, just because I'm an English teacher, it reminds me of, like, when you have in America, when you're taking either the ACT or the SAT, those standardized tests that a lot of colleges will look at, a lot of them do have an essay portion. And it's like, if I had just been like, okay, study the letters of the alphabet and study the parts of speech and now write a fancy essay that's going to get you into college, not going to happen for anybody. I don't care how much we've studied the theory of sentence structure. Like, there's absolutely no way you can write a compelling argument with fluid transitions and have a variety of complex writing structures unless you practice it. So they need to practice this defense against dark arts magic in order to defend themselves. I will give also Umbridge credit of her whole obsession with making sure everybody raises their hands before they speak. I personally don't have a problem with kids just shouting out answers, whatever. But to me, I feel like it makes the class feel more like a discussion instead of just you answer to me, then I answer back and whatever. But I know a lot of people, like, they can't handle the chaos of just shouting out answers. So I'll give her that. And I also have to enjoy the fact that she doesn't know everybody's names. I am also currently going through...
It's her first day.
That's what I'm saying. It's realistic. I am also going through the struggle of trying to learn so many new names. I have 73 students' names to now learn, plus 30 or 40 adult names to learn because I just started at a brand new district. So I understand the struggle.
I think Harry mentions that he's in front of 30-something students when this all takes place.
Maybe, I don't remember
the
number.
So if there's 2 classes per class, if there's 2 houses per class.
So you're saying there's like 60 kids?
Correct, that she has to teach.
For just that year.
Correct, times 7.
Yeah, that's insane.
And that's roughly how many kids?
If they have a spell or some kind of potion that helps people learn names, please teach it to me, because I am so awful at learning the names. Because not only is it the first name, but it's also the last name too that you got to know.
For anyone doing that quick math, and I just use the calculator, it's 420 students names at Hogwarts.
That's so many names. I'm sure the teachers at bigger schools than mine, I teach in a very rural district, so we are tiny. I can't.
Well, and you figure the new students are probably less, because some people probably do just leave.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot.
So
I give her credit for that. But in general, her rapport with the kids, not great, because she talks down to them quite a bit.
Well, speaking of just school, we'll get more on classes. And we'll get more on Umbridge here in a second.
Yeah.
Very quick second. But it's always amazing to me how fast news travels in a school.
Especially small schools.
Any school. Like, I went to...
especially small schools.
Well, no, because I remember I went to a medium-sized high school when I went there, and literally something happened second period. Everybody knew about it by fifth period, like the whole school.
I'll give you one better. My very first day of teaching ever in a school that probably had about 100 kids, my first period, from first period to second period, which was literally 3 minutes, everybody in the school already had formed an opinion about me based on what the kids in my first hour class had said. It was fast.
Well, everybody at Hogwarts had an opinion formed on Umbridge in about 2 minutes. So,
which, to be fair, I mean, she really gave that great first impression. So,
but anyway, so we have a very quick Harry interacting with Hermione moment right out the gate in this chapter where, Hermione explains to Harry, it's like, maybe everyone didn't believe Albus at the end of year 4, at the end of the Triwizard Tournament. Think about it. Like, yes, he gives his speech, but then everybody goes home and spends a couple of months hearing all kinds of other propaganda. And she's like, Harry, maybe everybody didn't really believe that. And he's like, but it's the truth. and Hermione goes, yeah.
Obviously.
I know. Why are you yelling at me about it?
Yeah.
And so my question to you was in this conversation, was Harry yelling at Hermione or was he yelling at the situation as a whole?
Situation.
Because I feel like in the book, when you're reading it, it comes across, especially with Hermione's response back to him, it makes you want to believe that he's yelling at her. When I think in that situation, he's more just yelling into the vagueness of...
Into the void.
Into the void.
I'm telling the truth, believe me
right.
already.
I don't think he's pointing it at anybody specifically.
No, I think it's just at the situation, and I feel like Hermione is saying something because both Ron and her have been accused of, thinking he's a liar or something. Not directly. I mean, like they've mentioned like, oh, Lavender didn't believe you and Seamus doesn't believe you. And Harry's like, oh, you're talking to them about how I'm a liar. It's like, no, child. Obviously not. Like, I think Hermione's just a little sick of it and just kind of wants to bring attention for Harry to the fact that he keeps doing this. Please stop. But I think it is just like, it's to the void.
You know what? There's an interesting quote that Harry says around this conversation, and he goes, quote, "We've never had great defense against the dark arts teachers," end quote. I'm like, well, that's an interesting comment to say when he's at least had Lupin.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It was just a quote that popped out to me as like, well, that's kind of weird for him to say.
I think he's just looking at it as the average. And 1 out of 5, I'll give it 1.5 if you want to crouch, of just not being good. I just love Hermione's outburst of like, this is the year we have to take the exams that determine our future, and we are stuck with this woman who is literally telling us not to do magic. How is this happening to me?
Yep. So we get this little tension between them early in this chapter. And here's my first big question for you.
Uh-oh.
I know. I'm reading this, and throughout the last couple of chapters, they've commented on the fact that Voldy has essentially caused a split and a rift in the wizarding world, and he hasn't even done anything yet. He's just literally existed.
Just the fear of him or the disinformation.
But we don't see the wizarding world as a whole. We see Hogwarts. We see this little microcosm of wizards. So when I was reading this chapter and the strife between the three of them, it started just hitting me of like, is our trio, the golden trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, are they like this mini metaphor for the wizarding world as a whole? Because you're seeing a very tight-knit group of 3 start to slowly splinter a little bit and snapping at each other and having little squabbles.
Which I feel is also amplified by just normal teenage hormones. They're getting older. They're maturing and people get angsty during that time period.
But I'm seeing this like parallel because they always talk about it. How it's like Voldy's back. Okay. And the adults you see splitting on it, but you never associate the trio splitting the same way. Even though they're chirping at each other a little bit more, everybody's a little bit more on edge.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I feel like in general, with situations like this in the real world as well as in the wizarding world, if there's a danger, people get more on edge, and that takes away their patience and their empathy, and you kind of look out for yourself more than for others, and that leads to snippiness and attitude and just a lot of unpleasantry. And there's a little bit about that with their interactions with each other. They have a lot on their minds.
So, continuing on with the trio, and the trio being a little on edge with each other, we get some Ron-Hermione interactions. And the first one is Ron expecting Hermione to just dictate his homework.
He is so lucky he decided to actually befriend her. Like, she is Google. Come on. Like, how does he do his homework otherwise?
But seriously, shouldn't, like... And this is referring to Snape's Moonstone homework from the previous chapter.
Yeah, like, look up the properties of...
Why can't you look that up in a book?
You would think it'd be really easy. I'm sure the textbook has it, like, bolded with like a header and lots of paragraphs of examples. Like, it shouldn't be hard homework. All of their homework really isn't that hard. I mean, like, they complain like, 12 inches of writing. That's a piece of paper, one-sided. That's not hard. Oh, I have to draw the diagram of this creature. Okay, they gave you time in class to do it. Use your time wisely. Your dream diary, no one can check your dreams. You can make them up as they do. Or you could be like, I have a reoccurring nightmare. Or like, just put 3 sentences. I know I went to Disney World and there were zombies. That's all I remember. Interpret it. Like, it's not that hard.
I know. No, I agree with you. So, I mean...
They're so dramatic.
They're very dramatic. But keep in mind, everybody, we are getting this through the
Adult
perspective. Well,
yeah.
no. We're reading Harry Potter through the eyes of a 15-year-old child.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're getting this perspective from. So, yeah, Ron expecting Hermione to dictate his homework was interesting. But then, now we have a Ron and Hermione thing again. Because Hermione spots Fred and George... with a gaggle of first years around them. And I wanted to get your opinion on the Hermione wanting Ron to help in the disciplining of Fred and George.
That's so hard. That's so hard to make a decision about. That's such a good question. So, good job on that. But I kind of agree with Molly. I'm probably going to change my mind as I talk, but like...
Let's do that. Let's have it as a poll for this episode, huh?
I really should be.
That should be the poll question for this episode.
I really should be. Because, I mean, it is true. Like, I mean, you would think you'd be able to talk to your sibling and be like, look, really? Okay, you need to cut this out. But at the same time, the dynamic between the twins and Ron his entire life has been like, you know, you're a little brother and you're not as goofy and fun as us, and you're always kind of like living in our shadows and the shadows of all your other brothers, and you're a little uncertain, you're not very confident, so we're gonna like poke fun at you as much as we can. It's hard to stand up and discipline a sibling like that if that's the dynamic you've always had. But I also get Hermione's perspective of, why do I have to be the bad guy, right? Like, I guess this is our job. We have to do this. This was the responsibility.
Is it your job?
Given. Well,
because where's the head boy and head girl here?
They like do not exist.
Is it her job? I'm not sure it even is.
Or what about like the 6-year prefix too? Like, who knows where they are at? But no, I think I would guess that the responsibility does fall on her. And the reason why I say that is because it reminds me of when I was in college and I was an RA. For those who don't know, an RA was like your residential advisor. So it was the student in charge of the other students on the communal floor in your dorm room. And if I was on duty and I had a situation where someone was doing something they weren't supposed to do, even if I called for backup, I was the one that had to write the report. I was the one that had to confront the resident because I was the one who witnessed it first.
Can I throw something out there that I just thought of now? I get Neville is still growing into his confidence. And I think McGonagall specifically says in this chapter, it's not your abilities, it's your confidence.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you need to work on.
Yeah.
He showed early on in his first year that he's willing to stand up to his friends.
Yeah. You're going at he should have been prefect.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Wouldn't he have earned that potential, right?
He's probably just, I mean, he's being underestimated. I originally was an alternative for the RA job because I think when I did the interview, I was too quiet and shy because I'm a very introverted person, although I know I'm doing a podcast right now. Like, you hear my voice around the world. But no, I'm shy. So I feel like when I did the interview, people were like, there's no way she can confront someone and put them in their place. Can we talk about spew?
We can. So what happens here? First of all, I love Hermione wins that Fred and George argument by saying she'll threaten him by contacting Molly.
Yeah, and that
Great.
like shuts him up so fast.
Great way to end that. But yes, we can go to some of Hermione's work with house elves. And Hermione ends up trying to disguise the clothes under trash and other assorted things in the attempts to potentially free the house elf.
Which Ron believes is tricking the house elves.
My question to you, Elizabeth, is what do you believe?
Well, before I answer that question, can I go down a rabbit hole that I saw? So my question as I was reading this was like, okay, can the house elves touch the clothing like that? Like, are they able to do laundry? Because Ron made the point like, well, they probably don't even recognize those as hats. Are they really hats? But Hermione leaving the clothes out, like, does that count as freeing? So I found a website called sci-fi.stackerexchange.com where there was this big debate. And basically what it boiled down to is the master has to present an item of clothing, meaning that it's an intended gift. So when Lucius Malfoy gave the sock to Dobby, it wasn't that he was intending the sock to be the gift, but he was intending Dobby to have the diary. So therefore, Dobby is like interpreting it as I've been presented a sock, therefore I'm free. So he's being a little loose with the rules, but he's going with it. Hermione's hats and scarves wouldn't necessarily count. So the theory that basically that website was coming down to is that clothes will only count as freeing the house elf if the owner of the clothes is knowingly giving up the ownership. So yes, they can touch clothes, they can do laundry, they could technically be touching these scarves and hats that Hermione's leaving around. It's not going to count. She's not going to free anyone. If anything, she's insulting them, and I think that would make her super upset if she realized that, but she's not, because...
Also, I feel like it has to be specifically Dumbledore giving them this, not her. Like, I don't think her has any impact. You have
no ownership of these elves.
Right.
You can't free them.
Right. So I think, and for Hermione, this is a rare, hard miscalculation on multiple levels.
Yeah.
So this is just an odd thing. But forget the legality of it for just a second. Morally,
should she
even be trying this?
No,
I don't think so either.
I think if you trick someone into doing something, believing that you know what's best for them and not letting them make the decision for themselves, it's not great. Don't do that.
Yeah, I think she's wrong technically, And I think she's wrong morally in doing this. I think this is a really unfortunate misstep.
It's
for
wanting
Hermione.
what's best for the elves.
But you
your
think you know
perspective-
what's best.
Exactly. And that people get themselves into dangerous, situations when they do that. So
We agree.
yay.
We're running long on the non-spoiler, so I'm going to run through this fairly quickly.
Okay.
But we get into the classes for this chapter. We get double charms and double transfiguration.
Well, I mean, basically all of them are just being like, hey, you need to make sure you study because this is super important. Don't embarrass us. Like, this is your future. Pay attention to what you're doing.
I already mentioned that McGonagall does reassure Neville that it's not his work, it's his confidence that needs help, which is an important moment, I think. Again, we don't really see much of charms other than just him reiterating that the owls are important. We get care of magical creatures, not taught by Hagrid.
No.
And even Harry has to admit that was an exemplary...
Which makes him so upset.
Yeah. It puts him in a real
gosh
problem.
darn it, I learned something today. Ugh.
Yeah, and the lesson was on bow truckles.
Which I also thought was a great activity. I mean, it was hands-on, it was informative. She made the connection for them to the real world. Like why is it important that we're studying this creature? Because they're the ones that are in the wand trees. Your wand comes from the wood that they protect. That's
but also, cool. Elizabeth, they will gouge your eyes out.
Well, don't try to break them in half.
I do like the idea that Malfoy is getting more collage messages from Lucius, who's sending him some info on Hagrid, it seems like.
Yeah, he made the reference to Hagrid might be, doing something that's a little too big for him. What that means.
So maybe he's clued into a little bit more information, which Harry's like, well, his father's a Death Eater, so he might actually know something. Then we go to Herbology, where we get a couple of different votes of confidence in Harry, which he desperately, desperately needs, even if one of them is a little uncertain that he actually wants that.
Yeah, I mean, Luna says she believes him, and she says it so, like she sees him and makes, a beeline towards him, and it's like, I believe you and everything that you have said. And, of course, people are giggling because it's Looney Lovegood, but...
She's wearing radishes for earrings.
It's a choice. Ernie, though, he also is like, you know what? It's not just weirdos who believe you. I also believe you. So Harry's like, okay, well, I appreciate that. Even if you're a little pompous.
Well, Ernie seems like he's not going to make the same mistake twice, because he did not believe him in Chamber of Secrets.
I'm glad he learned. That does show a little bit of character growth. Even if you don't know that much about Ernie, it's nice to see that aspect.
So jumping ahead to the big thing. There's
the point of the chapter.
This
was a long chapter.
There are multiple examples of this, though. He goes to multiple detentions with Umbridge. So this first one is really what I think we're going to be focusing on, because obviously it just expounds from here. But
well, I mean, the first one was doomed from the start. He was yelled at by Angelina to go try to get off of Friday's detentions, and that's when the Quidditch tryouts are happening. And Umbridge is like, oh, you want me to do you a favor? Absolutely not.
So, since it's detention, I want to get Elizabeth's thoughts on this, but I'm just going to run down what all of this kind of entails. You get his first impressions of the room, which is you get
disgusting
dried flowers, lace cloths, doilies, and a collection of plates with Technicolor cats everywhere, all meowing. She immediately starts off the interaction with an antagonizing comment, which is, you're here because, quote, spreading evil, nasty, attention-seeking stories, which evil and nasty is one thing. The real knife that she twists is the attention-seeking one.
Yeah.
That's the knife.
Well, it's the thing that she knows is going to set him off the most, because he never wants attention, and he always gets it.
So I want to actually ask a question on that, but I'm going to get into more of this detention before I ask the question.
Okay.
The actual detention comprises, he must do lines, he must write lines, and the line is, quote, I must not tell lies, end quote. And he must do it for as long as it takes for the message to sink in.
Yeah.
And what Harry doesn't realize at that point in time is the quill that he is given essentially etches those words, I must not tell lies, into the back of his hand,
It's cutting him.
thus producing the red ink / blood
Yeah.
that he's actually writing.
Yeah. She had to have gotten that quill in like Nocturne Alley.
I mean, I would think that might be a Borgin and Burke's kind of supply.
It's sadistic.
So Harry decides that his strategy here is not to show weakness.
Yeah.
He can't show that it's painful. He can't show that this is alarming him in any way.
Well, to the point he doesn't even tell Ron or Hermione.
Yeah. Harry does end up lying to Ron and Hermione about what the detention is. Also, and here's a big thing from it, is this detention is at 5 o'clock.
Okay.
He says it goes
so
to
long.
midnight.
Who is this supposed to be, like, punishing? The student or the teacher?
But this isn't just her, though, because we got the same general thing from Lockhart.
I know. These Hogwarts detentions are awful.
When do they have time to get anything done?
They don't. Like, I mean, okay, if you, like, with Lockhart, it was just you addressing the envelopes of the fan mail, but he was also helping, so this was, like, enthusiastic, fun thing for Lockhart. I imagine Umbridge is sitting there doing other work while he's writing the lines, but if you're there past midnight and then you have to get up early to teach the next day and then you're staying late again the next day and you're doing this all week, no. So you couldn't pay me to do that, like, at all.
Here's my question to you then.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, let's not beat around the bush here. It's torture. She's literally
torturing him, yeah.
administering torture.
Yeah.
But what I want to pose to you, outside of the literal torture, which is awful and just horrendous on every level.
I mean, God, imagine if you had a student who had previous experience with, like, cutting or suicidal, like, how this could backfire hardcore.
I don't even know that you could say it backfires. It's just bad. Like, there's no...
Yeah, everything is bad.
But let me throw this out at you here.
Uh-huh.
Is Umbridge, although harshly, actually teaching Harry a lesson here? And let me...
What's the lesson you're thinking she's teaching?
I think she is actually teaching him to control his temper.
Mm.
Because she comes up with the cutting statement at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And McGonagall could tell him 1,000 times, don't test her. Don't push her.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be stupid. And he will continue to be stupid. But she's doing this. And immediately he's like, I won't engage.
I think she's unintentionally teaching him that lesson.
Well, that's the lesson she wants to teach.
No, I think the lesson she wants to teach is don't tell lies. She wants him to shut up and...
Sit down and shut up is the lesson.
Sit down and shut up. And for Harry...
But the problem is sometimes he needs to sit down and shut up.
Well, I think the reason why he's learning that lesson is because his own stubbornness. Here's a villain. Here's someone I can hate because she's torturing me. So I'm going to do the same strategy that I use against Voldemort. I'm going to make sure that you don't see how you're getting to me. I'm going to stand up and have the bravery of Gryffindors, and I'm going to suck it up and deal with it, and then we'll just hate each other for the rest of our
I want to make this very clear. I do not justify the means she is using to get this result.
He is learning that lesson. It's horrible that this is how he finally decides to learn it. He could have easily just listened to McGonagall. She's a very wise woman. You should listen to her. But it's just evil.
Do you think Harry's right in not telling Ron and Hermione initially about the detention?
No, I would immediately tell my friends.
I do like his reasoning. Not that I necessarily agree with it, but I like the reasoning of once I say it out loud, it then becomes real and worse.
Yeah.
That's a very realistic way of viewing it.
Yeah, and he knows he doesn't want to worry them. He doesn't want their reactions because he knows if they're upset, they're more upset than he is. They've done that before with his scar hurting, so...
I'm just going to keep firing questions at you. How about that? Here's another question I got for you. Harry's having a week. it's a lot for him, and he's almost at the point where it's like, man, is Umbridge actually worse than Snape? So my question to you is, what is worse, mental emotional abuse or physical abuse?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Because you're getting the physical from Umbridge, and you're getting the mental emotional from Snape.
I think right now the physical is catching him off guard because he has never been mistreated with violence before. He's been used to Snape's tactics because that's the same tactics that the Dursleys use. So snide comments, the emotional, mental torture, like to him, that's just old news. Having blood be shed for this person, I mean, that's a different wheelhouse.
So you're literally going with he's already broken mentally and emotionally.
It's unfortunate. A lot of times people that have had that abuse, that trauma as children, they develop, techniques to cope with it. And I think Harry has coping mechanisms for emotional distress, but physical he's never had to develop. So that's why it comes across as so shocking to him.
So, really quickly to wrap up this non-spoiler section, I don't want to leave Ron out because Ron gets a big moment.
Yeah, he does.
So we find out that Ron has been also behind on all of his homework, not because he's having 7-hour-long detentions,
God,
but because he's been practicing for the Quidditch tryouts.
Mm-hmm.
And
while
Harry is in detention, to Angelina Johnson's dismay, the keeper tryouts. The keeper tryouts are actually occurring, and he's able to catch glimpses, but he can't really see who's who and what's going on. And we find out that indeed Ron has won the keeper tryout, though Angelina Johnson's like, well,
he wasn't the best.
He wasn't the best flyer, but I'm banking on his family pedigree of great
literally all of the siblings except Bill and Percy, as far as we know of for Bill, have been on the Quidditch team.
Yeah. Instead, she chooses Ron over 2 new characters, and I got to say their names because that's what I do. He beat out Vicky Frobisher and Jeffrey Hooper. So there you go. There's 2 new names. So
trivia for you.
A little bit of trivia for you. So we're going to wrap up the non-spoiler here because it's gone quite long, but we do have some interesting points to bring up in the spoiler section. So please hang around and listen to whatever crazy thoughts we come up with in the second half of this episode.
Yay.
We'll be right back.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
All right, we are back with the spoiler section of Chapter 13, Detention with Dolores.
I still love the alliteration.
Fair enough. So I got a couple of spoilers from this particular chapter and then a couple of overarching spoiler discussions that we can get into.
Okay.
So from this, very quickly, with Snape writing the instructions to the Drought of Peace on the board, isn't that essentially the Half-Blood Prince textbook when he's like, do this? He's writing that on the board.
Yeah, and I think Harry pays attention to the textbook more than Snape because the textbook isn't glaring at him and making snide comments the whole time.
Well, it's also not clear that it's Snape.
Right.
But, I mean, essentially, the instructions on the board, if you're believing that the Half-Blood Prince literally corrected the author of the potions book and was like, oh, this potion's better actually if you do this. Well, he's now written how you should do this potion up here on the board. All right, the other thing. I'm just throwing this out there. There's a potential curse. Not a potential. I think it's pretty much confirmed that there was a curse on the position of the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher.
Oh, 100% there was.
And Albus is fully aware of this at this point. So do you think, like, when Umbridge is dropping down her opening of the year speech and then things go along and this book goes along, do you think he's just sitting wherever he is, either in his office or wherever he goes to outside of Hogwarts when he gets finished?
You're not coming back next year.
No, but do you think he's, like, relishing, like, I wonder how she's going to go? How is she going to get booted from this?
I feel like Umbridge definitely was like, I can last very long. All those other teachers were not nearly as good as me. I will jinx what jinx.
Do you think, well, no one knows about this other than Dumbledore.
Well, I mean, there's the rumors that it's cursed. Dumbledore's the only one that, like,
knows for a fact.
Can confirm, yeah. Which is why I still think, like, the better job for Harry as an adult, I think, to make it all full circle, would have been have him be the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts. How perfect would that have been? But
do you think Dumbledore is petty enough to go up to Fudge and be like, oh, you want to place a member of your ministry in this position? I want her. Like, do you think he's petty enough to just be like, yes, you can have a position at Hogwarts?
I bet Fudge was very... Okay, I could see it as being one of two things. Either Fudge was like, Dolores, I know that you are not going to put up with Dumbledore's crap, so you go do it. Or she volunteered herself to do it because we know she's already tried to take Harry down in one area, and if Fudge has been complaining about Dumbledore as much as he's been complaining about Harry, what a perfect opportunity for her to take them both down.
Do you think...
For Fudge.
This is kind of switching topics a little bit, but do you think Umbridge, after the trial and while teaching, do you think she has the opposite reaction to Harry as Snape? In that Snape assumes he's not as talented as everybody believes. Whereas Umbridge is like, no, this kid might be a problem. He might be too talented, and I'm going to have to knock him down a couple of pegs that way. Do you know what I'm saying?
I could see that.
Like the opposite reaction.
I mean, her job is...
Same outcome of, I got to take him down a couple of notches.
Yeah.
But for different reasons.
Yeah, I think hers is very much coming straight from Fudge of, we have to discredit this child as much as possible because he has the potential to make my life difficult. So if he seems to be doing well, give him another detention. Why not?
Well, I think he's already proven that he's doing well. And she would know that, oh no, he's right. There were two Dementors. And he got rid of him with a Patronus.
When he's taking his practical owl later on for Defense Against the Dark Arts, and he looks at her and imagines her being, like, fired, and then he makes this wonderful Patronus, and she just, like, looks back. It's like, I hate your guts. And he's like, I hate you too.
I just feel like it's two opposite reactions of those two teachers. Like, they both dislike Harry, but one's like, oh, he's too cocky. He's not that good. And the other one's like, no, he's too good. We're going to have to slow him down
I've never thought about it like that before, but yeah, I could see it.
All right. So some overarching kind of discussion points here. I think we get more of this. Harry doesn't want to go to Albus. Harry doesn't want to go to McGonagall with the detention stuff. And first of all,
Harry wants to do everything on his own. He wants to be independent.
Yeah, and I get that, you know, he obviously tried to get out of the detentions with McGonagall, and McGonagall's like, nope, you earned this. You're gonna have to own up. So he thinks McGonagall's gonna do the same. Like, oh, this is just the part of the detention. It's to her discretion, so you're gonna have to own up. Which I don't think she'd react that way. But to his overall point, I don't know what she can do about it. So it's a little bit of both.
I mean, if I heard that one of my coworkers was cutting children or being verbally abusive or...
Well, she's heard of verbal abuse with Snape. She's also committed verbal abuse, by the way.
Okay,
she isn't the kindest either.
They have a difference between like, okay, McGonagall, I feel like she gives snark sometimes, and usually it's pointed.
Pretty cutting. Yeah, it's pointed and cutting.
It's pointed, and the purpose is like to get kids to stop being immature, pay attention. My subject's important. You need to learn this. Snape's cutting comments, I mean, I think everyone takes as him just being a man with a chip on his shoulder and a grudge specifically aimed at Harry. And like we talked about in the spoiler section, Harry has developed the skills to deal with that, much as he doesn't like it.
I feel like they both call kids moronic. One's just better at it. Snape
better, like,
Snape just
wording.
uses the word. McGonagall is definitely calling them stupid, just in a more disguised, camouflaged way.
I think my students have learned anytime I call them child instead of like their name, that's me being like, okay, you need to stop and like think
Yeah.
for a second,
Yeah.
and then let's try being smarter. Like that's what that means. But yeah, I've never told students to shut up, but I have told them to shush their face.
I've told students to shut up.
I've told them
I'm not a teacher, though, specifically.
I've told them to shush their face, but I've known lots of teachers who've told them to shut up and like stop being dumb and think. And is it great? No, every kid cannot take it. You learn your kids what they can handle and who you can tell that to without them like crying. I think that McGonagall does a great job with that. I mean, for her, it's like, I demand excellence from you. So when you're not doing that, like, this is your reminder that you should do that.
I think it's a mistake for Harry, especially coming off of the most recent conversation he had with McGonagall. It's a mistake for him not to go to that resource more often for just, if you're not going to tell her about the detentions, for at least advice on how can I best handle this class, because I'm having trouble. It's difficult for me. Like, this is the best shot he has at like a guidance counselor.
Yeah, I was picturing her kind of like a dean of students a little bit. Throughout the entire series, we see that he really underuses McGonagall, and maybe it's because McGonagall likes to put a little bit of a separation between herself and her student.
I think it's how she sets that boundary. I don't think her and Snape are all that different. It's just how, yes, McGonagall, obviously, before everybody jumps down my throat, McGonagall obviously cares more about the individual student. Yes. But really, their teaching styles are, hey, this is it.
Yeah.
You should be putting in the effort here. You should be getting this.
They both they have high
standards. Yes.
And they demand respect. I think McGonagall gives respect more than Snape does.
Yeah. But I don't think there's like worlds apart from each other. I think they're closer to...
Well, I think that's also why Dumbledore has those two being his right hand and left hand people. Anytime there's an issue, they're always right there.
Well, they also give very blunt, honest feedback.
Yeah.
Which is what they do in classrooms. Give blunt and honest feedback.
They're in his very, very, like, I mean, we know Dumbledore, his circle of trust is very limited, and whoever was within the circle really doesn't ever get the full picture, but those two are very, very close there.
Well, I don't want to rush past what I just said. The blunt and honest feedback. That's why Albus values their input.
I think that's why the students value them as professors too.
I think that's why they're actually very good.
Yeah.
And granted, that's not the whole picture of their teaching. It's an aspect of their teaching.
We're completely skipping over the fact that, like, you know, Snape verbally abuses
of course, yes.
people, and that's not great. But in terms of like,
but that's what I said about
when it comes to the curriculum.
I'm just saying they're not as far apart than a lot of people believe.
I feel like we're going way off what the original question was.
Oh, we're way gone from it. We're so far gone from it. Anyway, I'm not saying they're the same person. To wrap this up, I'm not saying they're the same person, and I'm not saying McGonagall is some emotionally abusive human being. Obviously, she cares for her students, and obviously, she's more supportive of her students than Snape ever will be or ever was.
Yeah.
I'm just saying she can be cold and she can be cutting. That's all I'm saying.
I think she brings it out in a more purposeful manner than Snape does. Snape will he's gonna cut because he's gonna cut, and it's gonna happen a lot. McGonagall's gonna make the comments that might be perceived as cutting when it's like, look, I'm trying to teach you something important.
What feedback do you think Snape gives Seamus or Goyle when he makes concrete potion?
Does he give feedback?
You're saying he's going to be silent in his critiques?
Well, I know he gives Harry gets his paperback that has the T on it, and it's like, ooh, wow.
Harry gets the full force of Snape's vengeance. Neville gets a lot of Snape's vengeance, but you're telling me that he doesn't. He, of course.
I've had a few coworkers before who they've made comments to the kids, but they get away with it because they have such an established rapport with the kids. I think Snape has a history with the kids, so he can get away with making comments. The joking back and forth rapport probably doesn't exist, but I don't know. I feel like the vast majority of the kids realize, Snape is just an unpleasant man, so anything he says to you, he's saying it to everybody. If McGonagall says it to you, then you're like, oh, wow, I let her down. I should probably be better.
I think they have more respect for McGonagall because she's maybe not as demeaning.
I think they have more respect for her because she respects them, and Snape does not.
It sounds like we're disagreeing more than we actually,
We're being nitpicky here.
We're being very nitpicky. Yes. Anyway. Back to what I was originally trying to get to.
I don't even remember what that was.
Long ago. Harry trying to get some advice or some counsel from McGonagall.
Yeah.
But
he should do it more often.
But the other half of that is Albus. And he says no to going to Albus over the detention because he's got a lot on his plate. He hasn't even shown any interest in me beyond
pure excuses.
Beyond my scar hurting.
Yeah.
And then he throws out
feelings.
He throws out that cutting remark about apparently that's all I am to him is just the scar.
Yeah.
Which is a very kind of philosophical kind of.
I mean, to me, it came across as the kind of comment you'd make where you have a lot of emotions behind it. Obviously, he's very hurt about Dumbledore not paying attention to him, and he makes the comment to kind of be offhandish, but that is what he's feeling right now.
Well, he's not wrong either.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, quite honestly, Albus... Look,
Scar does play a big part in their relationship.
It does. But the point of this whole conversation that I've tried to bring up that went way off the rails, the point is, I believe Albus's biggest mistake that he's possibly ever made in his entire life.
The entire life?
I think so.
Even with his sibling? Second biggest mistake?
No, because I don't know that that's a mistake. It's an outcome of his actions.
Okay.
But that's not what he was trying to do. Okay. He didn't try to do that.
Okay.
He wasn't consciously going, I'm going to kill my sister. That was an outcome of other things.
Okay.
Here, he intentionally is I'm ignoring this child. And I am stepping away from him.
He admits it later on of old people are foolish when they forget what it's like to be young, and I was trying to protect you and I forgot what that might come across as. But
there's so many simple, easy fixes. Yeah. You don't have to take him under your wing 24/7.
Yeah.
Just don't ignore him 24/7. Well,
remember his point was that he didn't want Voldemort to realize their relationship was ever more than pupil and professor. And Dumbledore isn't going around talking to every single... we rarely see Dumbledore hanging around the students, talking to all the students. He seems to know them all, which makes me think that the security system at Hogwarts is top notch, and Dumbledore's watching all the security tapes or something because he knows everybody. But I don't know. He should have talked to him, yes, but he recognizes later that it was a mistake.
It's a big one.
Yeah,
and it's not just this year that he does it. He does it at multiple points. He chooses not to inform Harry on key aspects of Harry's own life.
Yeah. Which again goes back to he underestimates the youth. Never underestimate teenagers.
He underestimates a lot more than... I mean, he's just wrong. Like, there's very few times when he's just very wrong.
Well, Aberforth says how, Dumbledore is too smart for his own good. He like, oh, I'm the smartest one in the room. I'm usually the smartest person in the room, so therefore no one else has any merit with their thoughts. Like, if I'm the smartest one in the room and nobody else has any thoughts that I consider valuable, I mean, that seems similar to scientists who are, way beyond the normal human being, but if they don't listen to other people, if they don't value their input, it's like, are you still the smartest? You're going to make mistakes, and Dumbledore did too.
I think in doing what he's doing, it's all okay. I'm gonna compare him to Harry here for a minute.
Okay.
So, my big issue with Harry early on in this book is he doesn't read The Prophet over the summer, and he misses some key plot points of how they're trying to portray him. And literally, the Order of the Phoenix is, no, you should really pay attention to this.
And then he doesn't.
And then he doesn't. And then Hermione brings it up later, and he yells at Hermione, why do you read The Prophet? Well, because you need to know. Okay? And Albus is doing the same thing. Albus is ignoring Harry and missing key plot points here that he should probably be aware of. He should know what Harry's thoughts are and what Harry's... I know he's keeping tabs on Harry. Like, I know he's not, like, completely ignoring him because he has the portrait in Grimmauld Place.
I feel like he has paid closer attention to Harry than Harry realizes.
But he doesn't know the key details because he doesn't talk to him ever.
Right.
He doesn't know what Harry's thinking. He doesn't know he knows what Harry's doing.
Well, to be fair, it's hard to know what someone else is going through if they never mention it to you.
Yeah, but you're the adult in the room.
Yeah.
You're the adult of the adults.
Yeah, but I mean, like okay, of your students, like, you could have a student going through some really, really rough time, but if they never make any indication that there's something wrong for you to even ask about...
No, but that's different because in his situation, he's well aware of everything about what this is going through, of what this kid's going through, what this kid means going forward, and the threat itself. Like, you have all of the puzzle pieces.
But he's acting in a way that he thinks is protecting Harry.
And I think this is the biggest mistake he's made. That's what I'm saying. It's a mistake, and I think it's the biggest one. Because he's missing essential plot points. Because he won't talk to the kid. You're running the risk of completely ruining your relationship with him and your credibility with him going forward by doing this.
Which he does also admit is a mistake. I think you and Dumbledore agree about his biggest mistake being this.
Maybe. We're going to wrap it up for the spoiler section. We've talked a lot about a lot of things.
To be fair, this was a very long chapter.
It was a very long chapter. It was a very loaded chapter with a lot of stuff. We had some kind of interesting questions that we've asked during this episode, so please let us know what your thoughts and comments are regarding Chapter 13.
Yeah, we'll have to do that poll.
We're going to do the poll on is Hermione fair for bringing in Ron. So check out Spotify and let us know by participating in that poll. I'm sure Elizabeth, of all people, will put it up on Twitter. And
look forward to it.
We'll get some of those thoughts. And I can't wait. I love some of the polls and some of the results that we get. It's so fascinating to see what we get on some of these.
Yeah, if you haven't voted in them, go back and vote. There's one for each episode, and it's fun to see other people's thoughts.
And we do check them quite often. Because all of the polls we put up on Spotify specifically are up for a long, long time. But the reason is because people come back and they re-listen to these episodes.
Yeah. No,
so,
I'm glad you have them up that long.
So we keep them up for a very long time so people that are just discovering the podcast can actually participate. Also, share the podcast so people can participate. And we keep growing, which we are very excited to see all of the growth that we've had.
Yeah, it's very cool.
You can support the podcast by clicking that link wherever you're listening to this podcast. It says support the podcast. And if you feel so inclined, you can make a donation It really, really helps keep this thing going because there's a lot of time and energy that we put into it. So that would be awesome. And otherwise, yeah, just like, comment, share, and we will see you next week for Chapter 14. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.